Hello, I'm Haslam, and this is my new channel, Verigan. Verigan is a chance for me to do three things. One, to share the experiences I've had in video games that are special to me. Two, to examine the intricacies of game design that allow these experiences. And three, to flex my own dormant creative muscles. For years now, I've really enjoyed listening to other people's stories on their own channels, and so I think it's finally time I tried to give back to that creative space. I wouldn't dare try to compete with the articulation that the big video essays have, or the detail that a lot of documentary videos do, or the assistance how-to guides would give, but instead to try and sit between the three of those genres and focus on the little things. This following story is perhaps my favourite in recent memory. It's also the namesake of this channel, so it had to come first, and I hope you like it. In the older versions of World of Warcraft, such as WoW Classic, every class had ability trainers. Abilities are fundamental to how you play the game, and you needed to visit a trainer often to upgrade and expand your character's skill set. Almost always, I played a human paladin, so my trainers of choice were occupied in the Cathedral in Stormwind City, the capital of the Alliance. The jog through the city streets that you're seeing now up to the Cathedral steps became routine, and a welcome break between adventures. All players of all classes would have a ritual like this, and it helped populate the city streets as someone always had to go somewhere, and it fed into the wider illusion that the world felt alive. As you enter the nave of the cathedral, the three paladins that will teach you new abilities are on the left, but today's grand adventure doesn't come from them, it comes from this man in front of us, Dithorian Roll. We've just reached level 20, and so our mentor Dithorian believes we're ready for our next trial in our paladin training, the Test of Valor. The autumnal region of Westfall has a critical bandit problem, and it's left innocent people isolated and defenceless. Jordan Stillwell, a man with ties to the church, has requested a visit to his home to check in on his wife, and as we are a paladin, the duty falls to us. As a level 20 human, we've already explored much of Westfall, and so we can take the flight service over to Sentinel Hill, where the local militia is quartered. The Stillwell Orchard is a quiet getaway far from here to the south, well nestled between the Dagger Hills and the Longshore. It really is quite hidden, not the place you'd simply stumble across, making it quite exclusive to paladins. I love the existence of hidden nooks like this. It makes me think of the many places unique to other players and their journeys. I'm never going to find everything this game world has to offer, making it feel less like a game and more like a world. Jordan's wife, Daphne Stillwell, might be a Scooby-Doo reference, though if so, I'm not sure I want to know what happened to Scooby. When we meet her, we find out she's already repelled several waves of the bandits that have come to take her land, and the next wave will be here any minute.
Charge!
Now, I must admit, my first ever attempt at that part got me killed a couple of times. I remember I had to get a friend to come over and help me out, but I got there in the end. Once the home invasion's over, we can then go talk to Daphne again, and she'll thank us for our service, and tell her to go back to Dithorian, and let him know that she's safe. So, upon returning to the cathedral and to Dithorian, we get thanked for our valour, and he rewards us for passing the test with a new spell and a new item. The new spell is called Sense Undead, which when cast will show all undead enemies as dots on the minimap. I'll be honest, I don't think I ever used this. The new item is called the Bastion of Stormwind. It's a big, shiny shield with quite impressive stats. If, like me, you prefer swinging around two-handed weapons instead, you can instead sell it for a nice bit of money, which will definitely help with upcoming repair costs, and there will be upcoming repair costs. So, we've completed the test of Valour, but Dithorian also tells us that someone should head to Ironforge and let Jordan know that his wife is safe. Us, he meant us. Thankfully though, it's not a very long journey, as the gnomes have built an underground tram line connecting the two cities. If you haven't played World of Warcraft before, you're probably surprised. Hundreds of hours in, frankly, even I haven't gotten used to it. Public transport can be quite awful in real life, but in MMOs it can be different. I'm not an incredibly social person, so in online games it can take some time for me to coax myself out of my shell. But one of the first, if not the first, times I actually spoke to someone else in this game was right here, whilst sitting on a bench, waiting for the tram. And this happened simply because other people were here with me, and just like me, they had nothing to do but to sit and to wait. When multiple people boarded the tram together, they wouldn't always give small talk, but at the very least they'd give each other a wave, do a little dance, or inspect each other's gear. And all of this, no matter how small, was social interaction in this online space which wouldn't have happened otherwise, and there's something about that I really cherish. Sadly though, the Deep Run tram is one of the only forms of public transport in World of Warcraft, which really is a shame. The developers of Project Epoch, however, a private server currently in development, are working to correct this wrong, starting with carts that take players up and down the local road network surrounding Elwynn Forest. Oh look, we're here. Jordan is a blacksmith who prefers to do his work out in the cool mountain air, just outside of the city gates. He's relieved to hear that his wife is now safe, and deeply thankful that we came to her rescue. Feeling indebted to us, Jordan offers to craft us a new weapon, his greatest work to date, and a symbol of our paladinhood. The catch, though, is that he doesn't actually have the required materials, and he needs us to go get them for him. Jordan needs the following 4 items: whitestone oak lumber, a refined ore shipment, his old smithing hammer, and a purified core gem. The previous test of Valour was merely to get us to this point, and the proper quest starts now. Jordan also gave us some notes on the whereabouts of each item. We'll start with looking for the refined ore shipment, as according to page 3 it should be the closest. Not far from Loch Madan, a large body of water up in the mountains not too far from here, is a settlement called Thelsamar. The local area is equivalent level-wise to Westfall, and on my first character I'd already been there for a short while to help out a friend of mine who played a dwarf hunter. Therefore, I already had the flight point unlocked, so we can just fly over from Ironforge. Jordan wants us to meet with an old blacksmithing friend of his, Baylor Stonehand. Baylor specialises in alloys, of which one would be perfect for our new weapon. Jordan has in fact already placed an order, but the shipment never arrived. When we arrive at his home, Baylor tells us that the ore never reached Thelsamar for refining. The caravan transporting the shipment was ambushed by the Mogrosh, a clan of ogres who terrorised the local dwarves from their stronghold to the northeast of Loch Madan. To get across to this stronghold, you'd perhaps be tempted to swim the distance. This can work, but as the water is infested with all sorts of nasty stuff, I don't really recommend it. You can instead take a detour north across the stone-wrought dam. It's much safer, and it provides a nice vista you really shouldn't miss out on. The Mogrosh ogres are elite enemies, marked by the gold border around their portrait. This means that an assault on their encampment cannot be done alone. Thankfully for us though, Thelsamar offers good bounty work for wiping them out, so there's often other players grouping up to attack the place together. Said groups could also make an excellent distraction as they plough through, allowing you to sneak in, get the shipment, and get out without taking a single scratch. As a footnote, I'd also like to highlight the lack of a highlight on the ore shipment. It's this wooden crate right here. Took me a couple of minutes to find first time around. So, shipment in hand, we can go back over the dam and back down to Thelsamar. Baylor is surprised of your return, but also elated. He somehow manages to refine the ore instantaneously, great for us, and hands it over. That's 1 item down, 3 to go. The next thing we need is a purified core gem, perhaps the most exotic item on the list. According to page 6, these gems can store magical energy, and to learn more we should consult with Thunderous Windweaver, a night elf in Oblivion who'll know more. Unfortunately for us, Oblivion is on the other side of the planet. More specifically, it's in Darkshore, on the northwestern coast of Kalimdor, the game's other continent. Thankfully, despite the incredible distance, it won't take equally long for us to get there. This is because the main port taking passengers across the Great Sea is in the neighbouring zone, the wetlands, where the stone-wrought dam routes its water to. So, heading north out of Thelsamar again, this time we'll stick to the road, follow it past the Algaz station, and further into Dun Algaz, a tunnel system that winds down the mountains. Something important I've until now neglected to mention is how travelling works in this game. Just after our first battle in Westfall, I used my Hearthstone. You can bind your Hearthstone to any tavern and can then teleport back there, but only once an hour. So during the cooldown, you have to pay a flight master to fly you from settlement to settlement. If you've never spoken to a settlement's respective flight master though, you can't fly there, and so when in the lower levels like we are, it means you have to traverse this massive world primarily on foot. I'd also like to take a moment to point out how cool these tunnels are. It's common for game worlds to be tailored to the cultures populating them, as both were likely developed side by side, but it's nice to see where civilized infrastructure has had to properly tackle the terrain around it. It has this kind of novelty that I really appreciate. The other end of the tunnel system empties out into the flat wetlands beneath the mountains, and a long road is paved between us and our destination, Menethil Harbour. Relative to where we've been before, it's a quite featureless journey, but it's a welcome change of scenery regardless. My first time here in the wetlands was actually a harrowing experience. When classic World of Warcraft launched, a friend of mine made a night elf character, and it fell to me to find him on the other continent and escort him all the way to Stormwind so we could level together. We were both level 5. Because of that night, the crocolisks that stalk this road will forever haunt me. Menethil Harbour is a little port town on the coast, and it has a couple of incredibly useful shipping lanes. The ship that docks on the left will take you to Theramore, a human settlement across the pond that's a good 15 levels out of our league, and the ship on the right takes us straight to Oblivion. Ships take a while to arrive, to depart, and they also take a while in transit, so there'd always be a few people along for the ride, just like with the deep run tram. Though the ships have added furniture, so you can either sit down and have a chat, or engage in activities. Oh look, landfall. Oblivion is a little port village in the same vein as Menethil Harbour, but it's a lot darker, has a lot less walls, and a lot more elves. Our contact, Thunderous Windweaver, is actually the village elder of Oblivion, and he remembers Jordan and so entrusts us with where the core gems can be found. The Black Fathom Deeps, a sunken temple along the coast to the south of here. He sends us on our way, but warns us not to go alone. And we really shouldn't. Black Fathom Deeps is actually a dungeon, a 5-person instanced experience that requires teamwork to complete. Back in the earlier versions of World of Warcraft, no matchmaking system existed for the game, so finding a group was something you had to do yourself. This usually would involve asking your guild, whispering other players you've met on your journeys, or shouting at the top of your lungs in the middle of Stormwind. The road south along the Darkshore is quite a long one, but really quite safe for someone of our level. The final part of this jog, however, when we enter the next zone, Ashenvale, is contested territory. This means that the other faction of the game, the Horde, also have quests here, and so are allowed to attack you, and you them, and they want to visit the Black Fathom Deeps just as much as you do. Sadly, on my first character, I followed this road all the way around, met a group of Horde, and got murdered several times, but I later found out that there's a couple of extra ways the Alliance can get there, that are far safer. Like several of Classic WoW's dungeons, Black Fathom Deeps is a really cool entrance that you have to descend down into. The Naga that drop the core gems can actually be found on the outside of the instance as well as the inside, so technically you don't have to do the dungeon, but you've crossed continents to get here, so you may as well make the most of it. As a human character, you typically have absolutely no reason to be so incredibly far from home, which is why I'm a big fan of quests like this that take you on globe-trotting adventures. You're sufficiently encouraged to play through the game's content, despite it being stretched over such a huge surface area. The feeling of arriving at new shores for the first time is pure magic, and the entirely unscripted manner in which it's done makes it all the more authentic. The opening sequence of the modern Dragonflight expansion I recently experienced was great, don't get me wrong, but looking back, I won't remember that. I will remember this. The Blackfathom Deeps is an intense, half underground, half underwater encounter, but frankly has no real relation to this story, so moving on. Once the dragon has been conquered... Once the dungeon has been conquered, we can take the road back up north to Oblivion. Thunderous will tell us we've got the right kind of gem, though the evil magics of its previous owner have corrupted it. Not to worry though, Thunderous will instantaneously purify it for us. That's 2 items down, 2 to go. Let's head back to the Eastern Kingdoms. The natural thing to do in our position is to use our Hearthstone. Its cooldown has probably ended by now, and we're ready to go home. But for our third item, Jordan's old smithing hammer, taking the ship back is actually the quicker route. Pages 4 and 5 of Jordan's notes talk about his hammer, which he left behind when he and his wife fled from their old home during the Scourge invasion. The Scourge was essentially a zombie apocalypse, and it wiped out most of the human population during the events of Warcraft 3, a few years before World of Warcraft takes place. Jordan used to live in Pyrewood, a village that was once a part of the Kingdom of Gilneas. Most of Gilneas was sealed off from the invasion, but the southern parts of the Silverpine Forest didn't make the cut. He trained under his father as a blacksmith in the keep, lumbering over the settlement, so that's where he would have left his hammer behind. But as with our previous journey, the issue isn't so much what we're doing, but where we're going. The Silverpine Forest is far to the north of the wetlands, and it's incredibly dangerous, with most of the human territories having been claimed by the Forsaken, the undead faction within the Horde. The following journey is the pivotal point of this questline. If a paladin were to quit, it would probably be here. This is because the long journey to Silverpine must not only be taken on foot, but it must be taken through very dangerous areas, and it must be done with a group, which we'll get to later. The time investment involved in simply getting to the hammer can be a filter, so let's not waste any more time. When first travelling across the long, muddy road towards Menethil Harbour, we came to a crossroads, and kept going forward, but this time we're taking the path northward. Most open world games, massively multiplayer or otherwise, would provide for you a mount for journeys like this, and World of Warcraft does, but not for a lowly level 20-something like us. You need to train your riding skill to use mounts in this game, and that can only be done at level 40. Not to mention, both the training and the mount itself are incredibly expensive. In fact, if you didn't know you needed to, it's likely you wouldn't have saved up enough gold. The second tier of mounts available at level 60 were considerably faster, but the cost for these was simply insane, and in the earlier stages of the game they were quite the status symbol. The high requirements make the first time you saddle up in World of Warcraft feel absolutely amazing, but until that day comes, we're stuck to trudging along on foot. It won't be too long before we reach the Thandal Span, one of the great wonders of this world. But unfortunately, it really has seen better days, so be careful where you step, and don't look down. The span takes us into a place called the Arathi Highlands, an ancient human land that has since become infested with all sorts of awful stuff like elementals, ogres, trolls, the Horde, and even dinosaurs. This area is for players from levels 30 to 40, and so it's way out of our league and incredibly dangerous. We're entirely helpless if any of the monsters along the road decide to attack us, but still, let's push on. Successfully evading dinosaurs and enemy players, we can reach Refuge Point, a secluded safe haven for the Alliance, and unlock its flight point. After taking a bit of a break to de-stress, we can finally get back out onto the road again, heading west. The big structure coming up on the left looks like it might be safe, but it's actually full of elite bandits, so if you're being attacked, don't go in there, things will just get worse. Eventually we hit a wall. Hopefully not a metaphorical one, but a physical one, a really big wall. This is Thoradin's wall, an equivalent to our Hadrian's wall, and though it's seen better days, it's still up there with the Thandal Span as one of the coolest structures in the game. Passing through the wall's huge gatehouse, we enter the Hillsbrad foothills, a beautiful land, much more appropriate for our level. But the verdant landscape is just a disguise for the deadly battleground it actually is. Hillsbrad is one of the areas where the Alliance and the Horde first meet, and ultimately come to blows. It's arguably the birthplace of world PvP in World of Warcraft, and for that reason we need to be just as careful as we were in the Arathi Highlands. South Shore, a nice little town on the coast, is the new frontier of humanity, and it's relatively safe, so we should head there and get the flight point. The Hillsbrad Foothills is one of my favourite places in the game, and is important for a lot of reasons, of which many are explored when you go back in time to visit it in the game's first expansion. But the video is already quite long, and that would be too much of a tangent, so moving on. After exploring South Shore, we can hit the road again and keep heading west, until eventually reaching the border to the Silver Pine Forest. The greens become noticeably darker and the atmosphere altogether spookier, and this is a clear indicator that we're entering the lands of the undead. Silver Pine is an early levelling zone for undead characters, a direct equivalent to Westfall, and so it's marked officially as Horde territory. This means that enemy players can't be attacked, but we still can be. Our best hope is to follow the road all the way to Pyrewood Village, and if we pass any Horde players, give them a polite wave, but don't stop running, no matter what. The place where Jordan left his hammer has since become an evil, tainted place, now known as Shadowfang Keep. Just like the Black Fathom Deeps, it's a dungeon instance, only this time the item we need is quite deep in, so we definitely shouldn't be alone. A great place to recuperate and repair our gear though is in Pyrewood Village, just down the hill. But be careful, the villagers are pleasant enough during the day, but during the night you see another, far less cooperative side too. Sadly, I've rarely seen this village in its daytime state, as the server time in this game is tied to real time, and I'd often play games in the evening. Regardless, I find stuff like this really cool, and I don't remember seeing anything similar in other games. What would be a normal levelling zone for one half of the player base is a useful, if not time-limited hub for the other, and attaching significant things to the day-night cycle of the game in general is really cool. Partially related is a nearby merchant called Wallace the Blind, who is at the sealed entrance to the rest of Gilneas. He sells some interesting items, including a really nice sword, and will only trade with members of the Alliance, who, as you've seen, really have no business being here at all. NPCs like Wallace are the nice hidden details that really fill out the world and add novelty. Gameplay wise, there is absolutely no reason for him to be here, but he is, and I think the game's better off for it. Up the snaking path we pass the meeting stone. I keep stopping, but I want to talk about the meeting stone before going in. These stones were actually the game's first looking for group tool. Simply interacting with a dungeon's associated stone would put you in a group with other players that did the same thing. They later added the ability to search for a group for any dungeon at Innkeepers, though this wouldn't actually teleport you to the dungeon, so nobody used it, and by the game's first expansion, the entire mechanic was completely revamped. Crossing over the drawbridge and into the instance, we quickly find that the keep has been appropriately named, having been infested by both shadows and fangs. The place has been taken over by a mad mage called Arugal, who's turned everyone into rabid worguns, World of Warcraft's stand-in for werewolves. Jordan's hammer is at the far end of the courtyard, but the metal gate barring the way is firmly closed, so we'll have to go this way instead. A short time later, we hit the locked door to the courtyard, and just down the stairs is the person with the key. This seems to be the keep jail, and all three cells are occupied. Horde players need to free the person on the right, Alliance the person in the middle, and in the leftmost cell is the blacksmith Landon Stillwell. Added to the game during the Burning Crusade expansion alongside Blood Elf Paladins, he is needed for their quest to forge their powerful weapon, mirroring our adventures. Landon's relation to Jordan is unknown, but as he is also a blacksmith and is a bit more grey, they're probably father and son, but that's never explored. Tangentially, there is actually one other Stillwell in the game, Marissa. She lives in either Northshire Abbey or Goldshire, depending on the version of the game, and will provide owners of the World of Warcraft Collector's Edition with their free pet. Opening the middle cell, we can free Sorcerer Ashcrom. He was sent by the other wizards to check up on Arugal, not knowing that he'd since gone mental. Careful. He goes over to the locked door, unlocks it with his magic, and here we are, the courtyard. After the slow process of clearing it of all the enemies, we can go over to the stables, and lying on top of a crate is Jordan's hammer. That's 3 items down, on to go. Shadowfang Keep is one of my favourite dungeons though, and it's worth seeing through to the end. On I think my second ever run of the dungeon, an Assassin's Blade dropped, and I won it. If I recall correctly, this is the best in-slot weapon for rogues wanting to do the PvP battlegrounds in this level bracket. And because of this, I managed to sell it on the auction house for well over 100 gold, which at this level felt like winning the lottery. Also, the final boss dropped some really good caster gear, and the robes are incredibly stylish. I can imagine a 12-year-old back in 2004 dropping their jaw in awe after seeing a player wearing it in Stormwind. Okay, so that's the longest journey of the entire quest done. There's nowhere we're heading back on foot, so let's Hearthstone back. The final item Jordan needs is some whitestone oak lumber, which he tells us about back on page 2. The whitestone oak is a rare and exotic tree, and its wood is known for its strength, so Jordan thinks a good handle could be made for our weapon. This step in the quest is typically the first step you'd actually take, not the last, but I saved it for last because it'll take us all the way back to Westfall, and it's always more poetic when things end close to where they started. The whitestone oak's resilience makes it very useful as supports for mine shafts, and Jordan happens to know that the dead mines had a large amount stocked when they were operational. With any luck, there should be some left for us. Landing in Westfall again, this time we're off to Moonbrook, an old bandit-ridden town, and into the Dead Mines secret entrance at the back. The Dead Mines is yet another 5-person dungeon, but after returning from our world-spanning adventures, we're powerful enough to not need a proper group, and can probably get by with just the help of a friend or two. The mines can prove a bit of a maze for newer players, and even getting to the instance caused me a bit of grief initially. I'd elaborate more on the story of this place, but at our level, we'd have been here before several times already, and this video is already quite a lot longer than intended. Eventually, we reach a big door. On the other side of the door is the big chamber where the lumber is stored, and guarding it is a group of goblin woodcarvers, led by their mech-mounted boss, Sneed. Once the room is cleared and Sneed is dead, we can loot one of the lesser goblins and get our final item, the whitestone oak lumber. That's 4 items down and none to go. Let's get out of here. So that's all 4 items in our inventory. We fought through mines, keeps, ogre strongholds, ancient temples, rode on trams, walked through mountains, trudged along wetlands and tiptoed through highlands. We've been across a loch, across a continent, to a different continent, underneath both of them, and back again, being chased by bandits, ogres, crocolisks, worgans, naga, ghosts, goblins, dinosaurs, and now we're here, at the final stretch. After taking the 4 items to Jordan, he doesn't waste much time before getting to work on the hammer. Oh wow, that didn't take long. He hands you your new weapon, Verigan's Fist, named after a late friend of his, a dwarf paladin called Bosch Verigan. Statistically, it really is quite a nice weapon. It's got a nice amount of stamina, a lot of magical stat increases, and a really hefty amount of base damage. Paladins usually won't find a replacement for this weapon for at least 10 levels, and the damage upgrade in using it is very, very noticeable. Sadly for me, as a Retribution Paladin, there's no strength or agility on it, but I'm just splitting hairs, and as everyone has said at some point in their life, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. Or is it? It's about the journey, not the destination. One of those two. Why is this quest the greatest in World of Warcraft Classic, in my opinion? As much as I do enjoy the narrative frame of getting a big hammer, the aforementioned journey is why. It makes a perfect showcase of everything I love about this game. Azeroth is a huge fantasy world that you can share with thousands of other people in real time. It doesn't really ask you to explore it, but instead subtly nudges you into wanting to. The 2 continents have a collection of incredibly diverse environments, and despite the game's maintained popularity for nearly 20 years, the world is still full of hidden corners and details that will make your journey feel unique. The game will let you fly solo, but even people like me who traditionally play single-player games are drawn into its communities through exposure to other people. You even share downtime together, and it puts everyone on the same approachable level, a level from which you can then build relationships with other people, maybe even join a guild, learn more about the game, and even go on raids together. And even if you don't want to talk to anyone, the knowledge that everyone you pass on the streets of Stormwind is a real person on their own unique journey just like you is so special. Verigan's Fist may just be a hammer, but the path to getting it is a path through everything brilliant about this game. And when you see its distinctive symbol on the backs of other paladins, you know that they know that too. So there it was, my first video. Though I only properly discovered World of Warcraft relatively recently in my life, it's one of the best games I've ever played, and it's let me meet many new people, some of which are still my close friends to this day. This isn't to say that World of Warcraft is a focus of Verigan though. I already have a few ideas for small details I can obsess over from all different sorts of games. Besides, if you want to hear more stories coming from this game, the channel Mad Season show more than had you covered. He was a big inspiration. And if you want to hear about the grandest quest in World of Warcraft, look no further than Barney64's Scarab Lord Adventures. I'll put a link to both of those channels in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, and if you'd be more interested in seeing more videos like this on Verigan, you can subscribe. Comments are also very much appreciated, as is any feedback you can give me, because frankly I've got no idea what I'm doing. Goodbye. Thanks for watching.